Welcome back to Pain-Free Periods with Stasha. I'm your host, Stasha the Period Coach, and your guide to understanding why your period hurts and what to do about it. So last week we talked about the 4 root causes of period pain: hormonal imbalance, often estrogen dominance, chronic inflammation, nutrient deficiencies, stress and nervous system dysregulation. So I promised you we'd take a deep dive into each one, and today we're starting with the one I see most often in my clients and the ones that most misunderstood: the estrogen-progesterone balance. By the end of this episode, you're going to understand exactly what estrogen and progesterone do, why estrogen dominance is a bit of a misnomer, how to tell if your ratio is off, and most importantly, what you can actually do about it. So let's start with a metaphor I use with all my clients. Think of your menstrual cycle like a dance. I have a degree in dance, so I know what I'm talking about here. Estrogen and progesterone are your 2 principal dancers, your 2 lead dancers. The estrogen growth, right? So estrogen is the growth hormone. The growth dancer builds up your uterine lining, gives you energy, makes you feel social and vibrant. Progesterone, the calming dancer, remember my Cheech and Chong hormone from last week? It's the one that makes you feel chill and relaxed. So the calming dancer balances estrogen, prevents the lining from getting too thick, calms inflammation, helps you sleep. In a healthy cycle, these 2 dancers move together in harmony. Estrogen rises in the first half of your cycle. That's the follicular phase, building the lining. Then after ovulation, progesterone rises to balance it out and prepare the lining for a potential pregnancy. So you do get a secondary little rise of estrogen in that luteal phase. So that's after ovulation. And it's not as high as when it's in the follicular phase, but it is a little bit of a rise, and that's normal in that luteal phase. However, progesterone is supposed to be higher, and this is where we see the dance get disturbed. And this is where a lot of the online information gets it wrong, which I know I'm online right now, so I get it. But you've probably heard the term estrogen dominance, and you might think that means you have too much estrogen, but that's not always the case. Sometimes estrogen dominance is actually a ratio problem, not testing numbers problem. So if you were to say that you had high estrogen and normal progesterone, yes, you have too much estrogen relative to progesterone. Classic estrogen dominance. Normal estrogen, sorry, I said progesterone when I recorded this the first time, so I'm just popping back in. Normal estrogen and low progesterone is your estrogen is fine, but your progesterone is too low to balance it. So your estrogen would be considered normal if you were testing, but because your progesterone is low, you're going to feel the same way as if your progesterone was normal and your estrogen was high. So regardless of how the testing numbers would come back, how you feel would be very similar. It's the same problem. You don't have the progesterone to balance that estrogen. So it does still feel like estrogen dominance, even though the numbers would be different. Does that make sense? So high estrogen and low progesterone is the worst of both worlds, right? High estrogen and just rock bottom at progesterone is also estrogen dominance. So again, in that case, you would have 2 things that are testing out of balance. And again, you're ending up in that same place, but worse, right? So the worst of both worlds, which creates the worst symptoms. So here's the key takeaway. Estrogen dominance doesn't always mean you're full of estrogen and that you need to reduce your estrogen. It could mean that you're just not producing enough progesterone, and I absolutely do see that in clients. So that's good news because it gives you more levers to pull. When your ratio is off, your uterine lining could be thicker than it should be, and then when it's time to shed that lining, your body has to produce more prostaglandins to contract hard enough to get it all out. Because prostaglandins is what helps your uterus contract to get that out. It's also the same thing that runs to a cut to puff it up. It causes inflammation in order to protect your body from further damage. So prostaglandins are very important. If you cut yourself, that area around it puffs up so that there won't be anything that gets into the cut to infect it, or at least to reduce what can get into that cut and affect it, until the white blood cells and everyone else can move in and start doing the repair work. So it's an immediate protective shield through inflammation. So you need prostaglandins. They're absolutely critical. You also couldn't have your period and shed the lining at all if you didn't have them. But if you get too many, more prostaglandins equals more pain. And it's not just pain, it's an imbalanced estrogen-progesterone ratio, which is also linked to heavy bleeding, large blood clots, PMS that feels like emotional whirlwinds, just mood swings everywhere, breast tenderness, bloating and water retention, fibroids and ovarian cysts. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that have ovarian cysts that are thinking about having their ovaries removed, when in reality it could be better for them in the long run to reduce their estrogen or get that progesterone back into balance so they can keep their ovaries and their healthy cycles. We need these hormones for not just our short-term, but also our long-term health. Endometriosis progression. So the more estrogen, the quicker the endometriosis grows. So it increases the progression. So when we talk about hormonal balance, we're really talking about getting that estrogen to progesterone ratio into a healthy range, whether that means lowering estrogen, raising progesterone, or both. I hope that makes sense. That's how I mean hormonal balance, is getting these two to being into that divine ratio. I want you to listen to these signs and symptoms and see if any of them feel familiar. Remember, it's about the pattern, not just one random symptom. So if you see 2 or 3 of these showing up cycle after cycle, it's really worth paying attention to. So period symptoms: heavy periods, large clots, cramps that start before your period, longer cycles, so definitely 35 days plus, but even into that 30-day plus, it's something that I would certainly be looking into. PMS symptoms, there's over 200 symptoms. So if it's coming and happening to you in those deep luteal, which is those few days before your period, it's probably a PMS symptom. Severe PMS, which turns into PMDD when it gets to be really debilitating to your life. Irritability, anxiety, mood swings, depression, all of those mood changes absolutely go along with PMS. If they get even worse, like anxiety, that you're having anxiety attacks, or depression that you can't get out of bed and you're not going to work, that's when we're looking at PMDD. And then if it lifts when your period starts, that's also a pretty good indication when those mood symptoms lift when your period starts. That's also a very good indication it's PMS, it's too much estrogen, or maybe you're moving into PMDD, which also benefits from that hormonal balance of estrogen and progesterone being in the right ratio. Breast tenderness, swelling, super classic sign of this ratio being out of balance. Bloating, weight gain, especially in the hips, thighs, headaches or migraines, fatigue, fibroids, cysts, endometriosis, irregular cycles. I mentioned those a little bit earlier. Fertility struggles, though, a lot of times people find these things out while they're struggling with fertility. Low libido, brain fog, hair thinning, cold hands and feet. Those can also mean that the thyroid's out of order, and that can happen when your ratio's out of order because your body is compensating and your thyroid starts to get burnt out. So you can end up putting yourself in a state of adrenal fatigue, thyroid burnout, these kinds of things from having this ratio be off for too long. So you can start to see it bleed into other parts of your life and your body. Something that most people don't know is you can have normal estrogen levels on a blood test and still have an unbalanced ratio. Even doctors don't realize this. Most of them don't even know when to test for progesterone to get an accurate test if you're doing blood work. So a lot of times my clients, before they go into the doctor, we talk about, okay, when should you test for this? When should you test for that? It's really important. And unfortunately, a lot of doctors don't actually know that. So tracking your symptoms is super important. And a lot of my clients don't want to test. They don't have the excess money for tests, or their insurance won't test for things outside of certain specific things. We do a lot of symptom-based work, and I'm not prescribing medication, so that's okay. We can actually do symptom-based work. If it works, you feel better. If it doesn't work, then we do something else, right? So it's certainly something that works for most people. And I always say PMS is the easiest thing to fix. I can fix anybody's PMS. That's not a problem. Fixing harder, more complex things like pain can take a few rounds of trial and error to find exactly what works and what doesn't work for your particular body and the things that you need. So your body is going to tell you far more than a single blood draw will. In my last blood draw that I had about 6 months ago, I had perfect hormones. She was like, "You're not in perimenopause." And I said, "Okay, well, I've only ovulated 3 times in the last year. My cycles have been 49 days, and they used to be 24 to 26. And now they went through a year of going every 2 weeks, every 6 weeks, every 2 weeks, every 6 weeks, to now it's just 49 days. 49 days. Oh, there was a 48 day. Obviously, I'm in perimenopause. Like, that's not even subtle, despite the fact that day, at that moment, my blood work was perfect. So what do you actually do about this? I'm going to give you a framework that I use with my clients, and this is the exact approach that helps women go from an imbalanced ratio to feeling like themselves again, dancing a beautiful dance. I want to remind you of something I mentioned in episode 1. Pain is like an onion. You don't peel the whole thing at once. You take one layer at a time. You might cry a little. And sometimes you have to set it down and come back to it. So I just want you to remember it's bit by bit, layer by layer, one level of pain removed. Sometimes you do need a breather. Sometimes you need to walk away. Just stick with what you're doing and then come back to try the next thing. So it's okay. And that's true for balancing your hormones as well as just coping with pain. You don't have to do everything today. In fact, it's probably most people cannot make that many changes at once and stick with them. And that is something that I need you to understand is pain management is going into remission, not cure. You have to make lifestyle changes, and some things you can step back into a little bit, but you're never going to be able to do again. Like when I worked for the Obama campaign in 2008, I drank a lot. I was in my late 20s. I had been a bartender in New York City for like a decade. I was a professional drinker, and I was in an incredible amount of pain, and not drinking didn't make the pain worse or better. So it was like, I'd rather not pay attention to it than pay attention to it, right? So I definitely knew how to drink. I was fine. I worked and everything, but I certainly was a professional drinker in my 20s. And when I came out to work on the Obama campaign, I was like, okay, let's do it. And I drank. We all drank. We were going door to door, knocking on people. We turned a red county blue for the first time ever. We were one of the top fundraising offices to help Obama get elected. I'm very proud of the work that I did. That said, once I started figuring out that I could actually reduce my pain through just my everyday life, food, that kind of thing, I don't drink anymore. I occasionally have a glass of wine if I'm having a big meal. New Year's Eve, I will have a glass of bubbly. Probably won't make it to midnight, but I'll have a glass of bubbly before I go to bed. So you might be able to have some things, but you may not be able to have them in the excess that you did. Just pick one layer, one action, start there, and that's how real lasting change sticks. That's how it happens. Here's the framework. I've split it into 2 categories, lowering estrogen and raising progesterone, because depending on your ratio, you might need to focus on one more than the other. You may need to do both. So lowering estrogen, if you need to clear excess, and this is something that everyone can try first, and if it makes a difference, then you know you're in the right track. So if you're producing or holding on to too much estrogen, these steps are going to help your body eliminate it. You need to support your liver. Your liver is what clears used estrogen out. So you need to eat cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, and I would consider a vitamin B, zinc, and magnesium glycinate supplement. Support your gut. Your gut bacteria help process estrogen. So eat fiber-rich foods like beans, lentils, oats, and berries. And another thing I like to do is refrigerate anything like potatoes, rice, anything starchy, because that helps build resistant starch in that food. And then when you eat it later, even if you reheat it, it's still in there, which helps get into the deeper intestinal tract and really help that flora, fauna, biome flourish. Reduce your environmental estrogens, so avoiding plastics. If you can, switch to glass containers or stainless steel. If you have plastics in the house, like I still have plastics in the house, nothing but cold can go into them, and then you have to get the food out of it if you're going to reheat it. So if you're putting away hot leftovers, they got to go in glass or stainless steel, something that doesn't have plastic on it. And if you want to reheat food, you got to reheat it in a bowl, ceramic, glass, something like that, right? Try and cut back on beauty products, all of those cosmetics and shampoos and all that stuff that you put onto your body. It's just a way for the patriarchy to make money off of making you feel bad about your body. I'm not saying don't have a luxury item. I have face masks that I do from time to time, that kind of thing. Lotion, sure, but try and get clean versions of it, not like scented and full of chemical versions. It's honestly such a money saver when you get rid of so much of that junk that's really just out there because that's how they make money. The beauty industry is the number one industry. It's just sucking money out of women by making you feel bad. And I love to do makeup and have events, but in the rest of the time, no. It's just stop giving them money. Cut back on alcohol. Like I said, I didn't notice a difference between my pain when I drank or I didn't drink, but when I did it over the long term, it gave my liver a break and then I was able to actually get rid of that excess estrogen. So it takes time for that to really be noticeable, but it absolutely makes a huge difference. So give it a break. And if you have to, try and do things where in the second half of your cycle, you're not drinking. And if you're going to go do fun stuff, go do it in your follicular phase when you're feeling outgoing and extroverted anyway. So try and give your liver that break. Raising progesterone, if you need to bring up the progesterone, which is certainly something that I see in people a lot. And we do see benefit in reducing the estrogen load, even if the estrogen is normal, while we work on getting that progesterone up, just so that they have a sense of immediate feeling better, which makes it easier to do the other things, right, that take a little bit more time. So these steps can help your body produce more progesterone, more of that nice Cheech and Chong action. You have to manage stress if you want to make progesterone. Your progesterone is made from a master hormone, pregnenolone, and pregnenolone turns into 150 hormones in your body, including cortisol and including progesterone. So we talked a little bit about this before. When you're stressed, your body is going to take that pregnenolone and make cortisol instead of making progesterone out of it. It's going to prioritize your stress. So progesterone is only produced after you ovulate. So you need to ovulate and you need to work on that stress. I'm going to do an entire episode on ovulation and progesterone because it's just so freaking important after we get through some of these root causes for pain. If I can impress on you one thing, it's that your ovulation is what you really should be tracking and paying attention to more than anything else. Because if you do not ovulate, you do not make progesterone. If you do not make progesterone in the short term, hair, skin, nails, all of these things, progesterone is your best friend. So feeling good, feeling relaxed, feeling calm, feeling grounded, feeling stable, all of that is progesterone. And in the long term, it protects your heart health, which is the number one killer of women, your brain health, which 70 to 80% of dementia and Alzheimer's patients are women, and your bone density. Women suffer from higher rates of osteoporosis, earlier onset osteoporosis, all of these things. And those are progesterone's long-term post-menopause. So you need as much progesterone now as you can possibly get if you want to have a healthy, strong post-menopause half of your life. It's going to hopefully be half of your life. So if you're not doing it now, like if you're on hormonal birth control, then you will have problems later in life. There are things you can do to mitigate it, but it causes a lot of problems. So you absolutely need to ovulate so that you can see how you're doing and making, so then you're going, okay, I am producing progesterone. You can confirm your ovulation and then focus on making sure that you're making enough progesterone after you ovulate. Vitamin B6, vitamin C, zinc, they all support progesterone production, and zinc supports follicular health, and it can take 100 days of taking zinc before you see an improvement in the follicular health. So if you aren't ovulating consistently or every other month or any kind of inconsistency with ovulation, you absolutely want to try getting some more zinc in. And Vitex, also known as chasteberry, can support progesterone. Always talk to your doctor before you add in minerals, vitamins, anything. It's just always best practice to run them by a doctor, and especially if you take supplements, because they all have a contraindication of some sort. When I did the supplements class for my perimenopause coaching students, every single supplement I talked about, I was like, I need to just start with a disclaimer that all of these have a contraindication. There's somebody who has kidney damage, right there, you have a lot of issues. Autoimmune disorders, there's a lot of contraindications for autoimmune disorders, so run it by your doctor. Just be safe. But chasteberry helps you produce progesterone. It was called chasteberry because it reduced libido in men. But for us, it can actually increase it. It can reduce it if you're taking it too long, and it does need to be pulsed to get the best out of it. I've taken it on and off for a long time, and I always see help and support when I take it, and then you have to pulse it a little bit, and then when I go back on it. So it's certainly something that's been very helpful for myself and several of my clients. And in fact, one of my clients couldn't get pregnant, and we put her on chasteberry, and she got pregnant quickly. So just throwing that out there. But here you go. Chasteberry can be helpful, but it, like zinc, it takes about 3 months, 90 to 100 days to kick in. So you need to see it happening, and the dosage can really differ depending on what you're using it for. So for some people, they just need like the dosage on the bottle. Some people need twice the dosage that's on the bottle. I do twice the dosage that's on the bottle for me because my endometriosis and my pain is so severe. Now, what's on the bottle is fine. So as I've gone deeper into remission, my needs have lessened in that respect. So pick one layer from the list, just one. Maybe it's adding a serving of broccoli to your daily lunch. Maybe it's swapping your plastic water bottle for glass. Maybe it's 5-minute breathing, exercise to lower stress, but just pick one thing to do the cycle and chart it. And then notice how your next period feels. That's how you peel the onion, one layer at a time. Now, this might make no difference to you at this stage because maybe there's something that's triggering the pain that you have to deal with first. So for me, it was a gluten intolerance. Probably celiac, but by the time there were tests for it, I had already figured it out, and I'm unwilling to eat gluten for 2 weeks and put myself through that pain, and then my next period will be horrific again just for a diagnosis when I know I can't eat gluten. That makes a huge difference. One of my early clients had a dairy issue. So if you find that you are leaning on one food source really heavily, that may be your trigger food. We'll talk about food down the line. But I just want to say that these actions can really help in the moment. They can help in the long term. They're worth starting and getting them sorted out now. These are easy things that you can do without having to upend everything. So see if they work, see how you feel. And like I said, if it's not making a difference, there's probably a bigger trigger that we're going to need to work through first. And we will go through those triggers as we go through this podcast together. So that's it for episode 2. Oh my gosh, 2 of Pain-Free Periods with Stasha. We talked about estrogen dominance and why it's actually a ratio problem. It's about estrogen relative to progesterone, not just too much estrogen. We talked about the thick uterine lining equaling more prostaglandins, equaling more pain, signs of heavy bleeding, clots, PMS, breast tenderness, fibroids, and more. Action steps are split into 2 layers: lowering estrogen through liver support, gut support, and reducing environmental estrogen, raising progesterone through stress management, ovulation support, and targeted nutrition. So pick just one layer and pick just one action and start there. Next week, we're diving into the second root cause that I talked about on our first episode, chronic inflammation. We'll talk about what's driving it, how it makes period pain worse, and the specific foods and habits that can cool it down. So if this episode helped you, please share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Take a screenshot, tag me on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or whatever. I'm at Stasha Washburn, and tell me which layer are you peeling first. And if you're ready to go deeper and figure out what's going on for you, your exact ratio, I do work one-on-one with clients to help them understand their hormones and create a personalized plan. And I always do a free consult call with anyone with painful periods. It's 1 hour. You get to pick my brain. I will overwhelm you, but you will walk away feeling seen, heard, and with a ton of things that you can try. So I'll put the links in the show notes. You can always head to theperiodcoach.com to learn more about me or Period Coaching School if you decide maybe you want to help others too. Remember, the revolution will be bloody, and it starts with understanding your hormones one layer at a time. Until next time, take care of yourself. You're worth it.